For that address, Prime Minister Harper. You've truly set the tone, of course, for India-Canada ties ahead, and also given us much to ponder about India's position in the new world order. But I'd urge you to please stay on stage for a very special question and answer session as well. There are some further questions that my colleague Megha Sharma would like to pose to you on your address and your wider vision for not just South Asia, but the world at large. So now over to Megha for this next special session as we continue Prime Minister Harper's time with us on stage at the NXT Summit.
Thank you, Uday, and a very warm welcome from all of us at Next to you, Honorable Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Let's dive straight into it, and we are talking about Next in democracy. How important is it for one of the oldest and the largest democracies, whether it is talking about Canada and talking about India, to work together in this multipolar world than to be drifting apart as we see in the current state of affairs?
Look, I think it's very important. You know, I do think, well, I talked about the fact that, you know, it's kind of increasingly a multipolar disorder everywhere and increasingly dog-eat-dog. I do think there is still, most of the time, fundamentally a difference between democratic and authoritarian regimes. Authoritarian regimes, by the very nature of their power structures, tend to be aggressive, predatory. And I think democratic nations, by their very structures, power structures and processes, tend to be countries that look for cooperation, collaboration, look for mutual gain instead of zero-sum. So in that regard, I think it's very important that democracies work together. Look, President Trump's views on this are harder to ascertain right now. What I will try and say charitably is it's clear that President Trump doesn't regard democracy as sufficient to work together. There also has to be a real alignment of interests and activities, and I don't disagree with that. But I just hope it's not forgetting that the nature of America and of our countries, India and Canada, means that we really do have a special ability and mission to make the world as a whole a better place.
Right, absolutely. And you talk about President Trump and his second term as the U.S. president of talking about, in the larger scheme of things, there has been a dramatic shift in his policy vis-a-vis Canada, whether it is talking about huge tariffs being imposed, the threats that he has been issuing, talking about making Canada the 51st state of United States of America. How do you view the current state of affairs, particularly in this dynamism that we witness right after his election as the president?
Well, first, Megha, I think it's important to say, and I'll be the first to admit, I have been surprised by a number of things President Trump has done, both domestically and foreign, not all bad, but I've been surprised in the sense that I expected more continuity with the first term. Yes, I did expect him to be more bold and aggressive in the directions he was going, but there has been some significant discontinuity, and one of them, of course, is what seems to be increasingly hostile view of a number of traditional allies. And in all honesty, I can't entirely explain it in the case of Canada. In fact, I can't really explain it at all. There is no doubt that President Trump and Prime Minister Trudeau had a poor relationship, and there's kind of hostility on that level. But President Trump's comments about Canada go well beyond disagreements with our government. President Trump has repeatedly asserted that Canada, in both economic and security terms, is a massive drain. First of all, on economic terms, that Canada is a massive drain on the American economy. He has asserted that on the security front that we are an enormous burden on American security and present a significant security, large-scale security threat on our border. The difficulty I have with these things, and it's not to suggest that there aren't economic or security irritants we can discuss, and certainly Canada should be spending more on defense. But these are propositions of President Trump are just fundamentally untrue. Canada-U.S. trade is 98% tariff-free and almost entirely beyond that unencumbered by non-tariff barriers. It's the most integrated economic relationship in the world. Canada is the United States. Right now we have a small surplus with the United States, but Canada is the United States' largest export market in the world. We are a larger, and many Americans don't understand this, Canada is a larger export market to the United States than all the countries of the European Union combined. It is a massive economic asset for the United States. Obviously, they are an even bigger asset relatively for us, but it's a massive economic asset. In terms of security, are there issues on the border? Yes, but the northern border is not the southern border. They're not hundreds of thousands or millions of people crossing the border. In fact, I think Canadian law enforcement will tell you the flow of guns, gangs, and drugs come just as much north from the United States as they do south to Canada. In fact, I would suspect they come north much more frequently than south. So these positions of the president are just not based on fact. I will also say, Miga, because we don't know where this is headed, that I don't think they represent any significant element of American public opinion. There is no significant American economic lobby pressing for comprehensive tariffs against Canada. In fact, quite the contrary. The vast majority of the economic actors in the United States would oppose tariffs on Canada because it would hurt the American economy. There is no movement for annexation of Canada in the United States. There was over 100 years ago, but there is, I'm not even aware of the existence of an organization in the United States that advocates that. So these seem to be, at the moment, views of President Trump. For what reason, we don't know. They shouldn't be dismissed because he is the president and he has the capacity to create public opinion in his own right. But as I say, it's I think most Canadians are finding this kind of a parallel universe.
Right, absolutely. So then, why do you think in his second term he has come down so heavily on Canada? Why this dramatic foreign policy shift when you talk about the country?
I do not know. I tell people there are 5 possible layers of explanation. One is that it's shock effect, entertainment, dominating the headlines. Second is that intense dislike of the current government of Canada and its Prime Minister, that's personal. The third is that it's laying the groundwork for some kind of, leverage for some kind of big ask from Canada on the trade or our security front. But what that is, I don't know, and nobody does. The fourth explanation is that he is actually an ideological protectionist who believes that economic activity should be moved to the United States, even if it's mutually beneficial to trade. And the fifth explanation, he is actually an annexationist who would like to create the largest contiguous empire in the history of humanity by getting Canada and Greenland to be part of the United States. I tell people I think it's all of these things. But what we don't know is what is actually important to President Trump and what he will press forward with. I must admit, as I say, I don't, the President of the United States can make his own decisions, but I don't understand, given all the challenges in the world and all the challenges that the United States has at home and abroad, why this kind of almost warlike footing with Canada makes any sense. I just don't understand it.
And what do you think are going to be the political implications domestically for Canada, because elections are looming?
Yeah, look, political implications are already enormous. And really ironic, because if Mr. Trump, as we all know, intensely dislikes the current government, he's actually put them back in the game politically. The entire issue set has changed. The entire issue set in Canada up until a few weeks ago was the poor performance of the Canadian economy, frankly, very poor performance of the Canadian economy. We have declining living standards in the average Canadian household, and a lot of hostility to the government about that economic performance and about cost of living factors. Now, I'm not saying those issues have gone away, but they're not much more now in the realm of the greater economic and national threat to the country's future itself. And by definition, when a country is under that kind of a threat, there tends to be some rallying to the incumbent government. It becomes more difficult for opposition parties to attack the current government on day-to-day management. So, whereas, to be blunt, 2 months ago, we would have had a almost certainty that the current government would be defeated in the upcoming elections, which we expect very soon. Now, I think we expect it to be a close election. I still think my party, the opposition Conservative Party, will win, but that is not a foregone conclusion the way it was a few weeks ago.
That's interesting. And also, you know, like you said, there have already been so many problems. For years together, the Canadian GDP has been tumbling. You're speaking about the standard of living. Grocery rates have been skyrocketing. People are complaining. And this was the case under the Trudeau government. How do you think, as you said, you know, there may be implications with Trump administration coming and attacking Canada, economic policies are then going to be impacted heavily. But how does the average Canadian think and react to all these developments?
You know, I think at first there was some of this, the first kind of tweets the president did on this, calling Justin Trudeau the governor of the 51st state, saying that, you know, our great famous hockey star Wayne Gretzky should become the new governor. I think people thought this was kind of a joke and really directed at Mr. Trudeau. And let's remember, Mr. Trudeau is so unpopular that his own party just basically removed him from office. But the truth is that the president's statements on this have been they're impossible to dismiss as a joke. The president has repeatedly made the case now of why, not just why Canada should be part of the United States and why Canada should not exist. As I say, he has accused Canada of being an economic drain. He has accused Canada of being a security risk to the United States. And he has further even gone so far as to say that the tariffs he threatens to put on Canada, 25% across the board. By the way, important to realize, putting a 25% across the board tariff on Canada would be a complete abrogation of the tariff-free trade agreement President Trump himself signed with Canada. And he has been saying that he will do this, and that part of the reason for doing it is to force Canada economically to join the United States. So these are the actual statements he's been making. So I think, Miga, it's gone way beyond something we can just dismiss as a joke. Now, look, I've told Canadians to be calm. The president has threatened many things he hasn't done. He backed off 25% tariffs a month ago. He says he's going to do them this month. I don't know. We obviously have to be prepared. But as I say, let's not panic until we see what actually happens. Let's have plans, but let's not panic. And let's you know, let's retain a respectful discourse with the United States. You know, the reality is, notwithstanding whatever is driving President Trump, can the United States are great friends, partners, and allies. Our peoples are very close. And it is not in our interest to escalate this. It's our interest to, you know, deal with whatever does have to be dealt with. We're very unclear what that is, but find a productive way forward. So, you know, be prepared, but be prepared for the worst, but don't contribute to it.
Okay, thank you, Prime Minister Harper. You know, there are a lot of members from the audience who would like to ask you a lot of questions. So let's open the floor for our guests. Can we have the first question? Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you for that very insightful interview. And Shri Kartikeya Sharma, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha, has a very...
I think we've got a mic problem.
Very...
Good morning, Prime Minister. I wanted to know, in the face of a hostile America, how do you see the bilateral ties between Canada, India, and also the trade relations?
Yeah, trade in Canada.
Indian Canada.
Look, I believe...
Trade between, yeah, trade
Yeah,
between
look,
India and Canada.
I believe very strongly that Canada and India need to deepen their economic relationship. When I was in office, we were successful in negotiating a social security agreement, also a nuclear cooperation agreement. We had started discussions on foreign investment protection and promotion agreement, and we'd even had some preliminary discussions on a trade agreement. So I think there's a universal agreement in Canada that we would like to deepen our both investment and trade flows with India. That has been happening, not happening at the rate it should be happening, in my opinion, given the complementarity of our economies, but that has been happening, and I certainly think now it's an imperative. I mean, obviously, given the overwhelming majority of our trade that goes to the United States, it's now more important than ever that Canada diversify its trade, and India is a logical place for that to happen.
Yes, Prime Minister Tony Abbott would actually like to ask that question. Sabri, could we get that mic over here, please, quickly?
Well, Stephen, thank you for that very thoughtful and insightful address. I'm going to suggest later today that on balance, Trump is more good than bad for the wider world. And I'm wondering what you think. Is he more good or is he more bad for the wider world?
Yeah, look, Tony, Prime Minister Abbott, great question. Look, I thought, looking back, I'd be very candid. I looked at the last time President Trump was in office, those 4 years. Obviously a time of upheaval. He challenged many basic assumptions of U.S. foreign policy. And then we had 4 years of the Biden administration. I think it is unquestionably the case that the world was stronger and safer under the first Trump administration than under the Biden administration. We had, subsequent to Trump leaving office, we had 2 major wars break out, and threats of wars elsewhere. We had the further retreat of democracy and democratic nations around the world. And frankly, just, I thought just a heightened lack of clarity from the West about who its friends and enemies were. I mean, we saw it with this country. We saw in the rather cool treatment that the Modi government got from the Biden administration frequently. We saw those kinds of issues. So, Tony, I would have told you and felt very strongly that during the election, based on everything the president was saying, that the world would become once again stronger and safer under a new Trump administration. I think the jury is now out. I think we've got to admit that we're all being thrown some curveballs. And the curveballs are 2 things, one of which I already alluded to. The president's seemingly agnostic view about whether a country is democratic or not as being an important thing. President Trump's willingness to make nice with Russia, with Turkey, and others, while at the same time launching, attacks on Canada, Denmark, others, I think raises real red flags. And I think it's just the broader case that it's not clear who in the president's mind are friends and who are opponents. And I must tell you, well, look, I understand the geopolitical argument that wouldn't it be great if the United States could cement a better relationship with Russia and pull Russia away from China. That's a great theoretical argument. The problem is this. you and I, and more so me, my time in office, spent a lot of time with Vladimir Putin. Like, I watched George W. Bush and Barack Obama try to make an ally of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin doesn't want to be an ally and is not an ally and will never be an ally. He is a geopolitical rival of the United States who is intent on the destruction of American power in the world. And the fact that President Trump doesn't seem to understand that, I think, is very concerning. The fact that President Trump wants, as I said earlier, democratic allies to pony up, put real resources on the table, participate with the United States, make concrete contributions to shared values and shared goals, as the Israelis have done, frankly, as your government in Australia has often done, and some other allies have done. That's understandable. But as I say, just gratuitous attacks on countries like Canada and Denmark are incomprehensible. Denmark, Greenland. The United States has military bases in Greenland. The Danes are completely in cooperation with the Americans on these issues. Why are they attacking a Danish territory? It makes no sense. So I think, Tony, it's possible this will sort itself out and the President's overall objectives will become clearer, but I have to say at the moment that he has created, I think, far greater uncertainty. First of all, economic uncertainty around the world. You're starting to see markets get jittery. And more importantly, I think he's created really serious uncertainties in a range of capitals, not just in Europe, but also now in the Asia-Pacific. Real uncertainty about whether the United States is really committed to kind of a global security alliance with other democratic nations around the world. Perhaps that'll be corrected, but right now I think it is in serious doubt.
Sauri, there are more questions that our members of audience want to ask.
Prime Minister, thank you for an excellent talk and your question-answer session. May I ask one more question in relation to what you just said in your comments? Is seeing that India and Canada are both middle power countries, what are the, especially in this multipolar world, what are the key areas of collaboration that you see between other democratic multipolar countries beyond the obvious keys of technology, let's say, trade, etc.? What can you see beyond that with the other middle power democratic countries?
Well, if there is to be a global democratic security alliance, there is no reason why India and Canada can't be more robust participants in that. When I was Prime Minister, we greatly strengthened security collaboration between the security agencies of our two countries. Collaboration, contact became very regular. It wasn't Five Eyes regular, but we had elevated it significantly. You know, India has since become engaged in the Quad. Canada has not become engaged in those Asia-Pacific and Indo-Pacific exercises. It should. I think under a new Conservative government it would. So certainly on the security front. The economic front, obviously trade, but more important than trade is just the greater security that provides both our countries. Canada has, as you know, immense mineral and energy resources that India wants. Canada is not today in a position to export those. It should be. That is a link that could be built, and likewise Canada could use the diversification of its market, particularly given the current troubles with the United States. So that economic partnership could be not just more fully developed, but developed in a way that really bolsters the securities of both our countries and of our allies. Finally, we could really and should really greatly enhance the people-to-people links. As you know, we now have, I think it's getting close to 2 million Canadians of Indian background. Many come back here not just to visit, but to do business. There are growing linkages. I will give the government of Prime Minister Modi great credit for not disrupting those people-to-people ties, given the current coolness between the governments. But we should be building those. And look, let me be very blunt on the Canadian side. On the Canadian side, as I said in my remarks, Canadians generally and Indo-Canadians specifically are overwhelmingly supportive of this country's unity and of our ties to this country. And it is about time that all political parties and politicians in Canada made building those people ties that represent the vast majority of our peoples the priority, and not the priority of building relations with Khalistanis. When I was Prime Minister, it was very clear to anyone in my government there was to be no interaction with Khalistanis in Canada. They are a fringe minority of the Canadian population. They are injurious to good relations between our countries. And that should be put aside. In Canada, you have a right to be a Khalistani. It's a democratic opinion. But it should not be infiltrating our governing party, and it should not be inhibiting good people-to-people relations between India and Canada.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prime Minister Harper, for this wonderful, insightful session. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. A huge round of applause for Prime Minister
Thank you.
Stephen Harper.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Harper, for that insightful